Good afternoon. It is Kurt Capra here with your daily recap for this Friday, June 9th. And what an interesting day it was after opening pretty neutral. I mean, slightly up, but pretty neutral overall. Markets were able to push higher before a sharp and steady, persistent sell-off took place throughout most of the morning into the afternoon. And then, as you can see, we did get a bit of a rebound here on the S&P, but that's for the S&P. It was a very different story when we look at tech, and even if we look at the small caps and the Russell, which we will, again, very different stories. But let me just show you here the intraday chart hourly. You can see here was the up open, pushed higher, made new highs, and then we got this inside bar, which once broken just accelerated the selling, right? Things started to unravel from there. Big move down through this prior support, but as we can see here, we were able to recover there in the final hour of the day, taking us back up above that support level. So while we did break below it, we did not close below it, which is an important distinction. So we'll see how this plays out into next week, where we do have the FOMC decision coming up as well. So definitely some things to look forward to in that regard. But as we go back to the daily, you can see it was a very volatile session overall, as we had an outside range type of day. And like I said, I mean, it was just very interesting. And if we take a look at the Qs, you can see here that it was very different, far weaker with regard to the Qs as money started to kind of move out of, rotate out of the tech names. And we'll take a look here, names like Nvidia, Apple, Facebook. I mean, they were all getting crushed here today with huge volume. You can see the volume in the Qs here, huge volume pickup, slice through multiple support levels in terms of prior bars lows. However, if we scale this back to the beginning of the move up here, right, depending on what you're using as your pivot, this trend line is still, for the most part, again, depending on where you're going to use it, still for the most part intact. So while this is a sharp move lower, it hasn't damaged the longer term trend. Now, yes, we're below the 8 and the 21 day here now, so it's more of a risk off with regard to this. But as we saw, the S&P and even the Russell are a bit different in that regard. So we'll see how this all plays out. But names like Apple, right, absolutely crushed here after consolidating up at these highs. So you got Apple getting crushed. Facebook got sliced through support down to this 50-day where it was able to bounce from. So definitely weak there. And as I mentioned, Nvidia, after gapping higher, it was due, right? I mean, really nice move up, gapped up yesterday, pushed up, gapped up again today, getting extension from that 8 EMA. And like I said, we just sliced right back to the downside into support. And we have to put this in the context of what's gone on, right? I mean, yes, it was a sharp move lower, right? You can look at names like Apple, sharp move lower. This one probably did the most damage. However, if we look back to this prior area of support, nothing has happened in terms of breaking that. So putting it in perspective and not just thinking about what happened here today and thinking it's the end of the world, we still have support levels that we'll need to see hold. Furthermore, looking at the small caps, they held up well. They closed green, and they've been the weakest, so that's a positive. And banks, I mean, look at financials. It was like a whole different day for financials as they continue to surge higher through this horizontal resistance level here now. And you had names like JP Morgan, which pushed up through that prior pivot high. That was strong. Goldman, while not as strong, was still able to push up. You had Morgan, which pushed up. So a lot of these bank names, BAC, really had a very different day. So it's a clear rotation out of tech, starting to get a little more confidence in banks ahead of the FOMC decision. TLT bonds here, they stabilized in the gap fill area, nothing special going on there. So overall, it was a very interesting day, and it will be very interesting to see how things play out ahead of the FOMC next week. So we'll wait on that, see what's going on, and give you guys the tools you need to be prepared for each and every single morning, as well as summarize the day for you here in the recap. So with that, have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you next week.